Curiosity Podcast.
Start off with intros. Mike, if you want to lead off with introducing yourself as well.
Yeah, sure. I've been in KL for 15 years. I originally came here, I was a media consultant, and I was making business documentaries, meeting with all the ministers and the top captains of industry. And I would buy airtime on CNBC, and then we would make business documentaries and put that on CNBC, highlighting the different industries in Malaysia. So that gave me a very good macro perspective of the economy here. But at heart, I'm a storyteller, right? So with that, I was telling stories about businesses and telling stories about Malaysia to the international community. I then flipped that into the fictional realm and started making movies and investing in films. Because like I said, at heart, I'm a storyteller, right? So we made a film, and I'm an entrepreneur as well. We started an F&B business, and we had restaurants all over KL. We introduced New York pizza and burgers to Malaysia before exiting that in late after COVID in 2021, because we built up a big delivery network. We had 20-something virtual kitchens and 7 physical outlets, and we got bought out by a company that was funded by Pernas, I think, one of the government agencies, I can't remember. But and like I said, you know, we've been investing and producing films in Malaysia now for the last couple of years. I've got a fund that invests in local films and also invests in companies as well. So we invest in companies outside of Malaysia mostly. I stay on top of the technology industry simply for the fact that we're investing through family office. And you know, I was just inspired to write this article about it. Is there problems with hearing? Okay. Hello? Okay. Sure, if you can't hear me in the back. So I was inspired to write an article about AI in our society after holding. Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. After holding a bunch of job interviews, all right. So just to give you background on essentially why I'm here today, right? I look at AI from more of a philosophical standpoint than anything else. I keep up with the latest trends, the companies that are involved in it, and I tend to look at it from a futuristic standpoint as to where it's going to be next. And the reason I wrote this article on AI is because I was interviewing people. And it felt like I wasn't interacting with people. It felt like I was interacting with their AI proxies. You know, every email, every interaction, everything just felt tailored, precise, just polished to a point where it wasn't human, right? And that's one of the things about being human is those little imperfections. But AI doesn't really have that. And to me, it was quite noticeable. Because I work with AI on a daily basis as well. All right, before we get into that more, let Kevin introduce himself, because I can go on and on with this forever. So
this will be one of the challenges with the conversation, because it has a strong tendency to like really get into it and get excited and back and forth. Quick intro on myself. My background is basically entirely on the investor side. I've now been involved in the review of a few thousand companies. I've been an investor in a few hundred. I've been living in Malaysia now for 8 years. I originally came with another investment fund where I was managing the Asia portfolio for them. A few years back, I saw that there was a strong opportunity and a big gap in the market for really early stage capital, kind of first check into some of these companies, especially around some of the emerging technologies that we're seeing that are B2B business models. A lot of what we've seen in Southeast Asia has generally been very consumer oriented. I don't think we need more e-commerce players, but we do need a lot of the technology to make businesses better. And so a few years ago, I launched that. So we're quite keen on spaces of AI. We've invested in a number of companies. Happy to talk my book and talk some of our portfolio companies, but that's not the intention of today. But really keen on it. So I got kind of that front row seat of what are the emerging technologies, because we come in very early. It's generally when ideas are turning into product and product is turning into traction. It's giving that visibility of what are the companies that are going to be dominant in 5-10 years from now, and really trying to understand what's kind of emerging. Is it hype or is it value? Where is the direction? What does this mean for the industries? What does it mean for enterprise? And really trying to create thesis around kind of the direction and a lot of what we're going to talk about. So let's jump into some of the back and forth here, yeah?
Okay.
Because you alluded to something that I find really interesting is you said that you use AI on a day-to-day basis, and because of that, you can now see some of the cosmetic perfection, let's call it,
Yeah.
of your interactions that are supposed to be human, but it's not really human anymore. So I'm curious, just to kind of kick things off, what AI are you using? How is it impacting your daily life, personally or professionally?
I mean, I use a variety of products. I have, ChatGPT, paid for ChatGPT. I use Grok. I've tested with Gemini. Those are primarily the three that I look at. Sora, I've tested. I mean, in terms of testing, right? Because in my industry, we produce films. So one of the things that we've been keeping a real track on is prompt to video, right? That's something that I think is going to affect the film industry later on. But no, I mean, essentially, I think AI has essentially kind of replaced Google for me. I'd prefer to go to ChatGPT than to Google because it just takes out the middleman, right? I don't have to do the legwork of going through websites, whereas it could just give me exactly what I need that much faster. So yeah, and I teach my children how to use it as well. I think it's real important because I think it's going to be an important part of the future of the world. But I also think it's a double-edged sword, which is why this is called being human. And the interaction, the human interaction is going to be real important. But they're interesting. And in terms of different products, right? Kevin and I were talking recently, just in the back, about like the AI race, right? Between so just to get into it for some of you guys who might not be that familiar, I'm sure a lot of you are, right? But we've been interacting with AI for years. And years, right? Through social media and the algorithms that social media push towards you in your feed. And I remember the impact for me. There's a few turning points. Like one of them was I was working, I was in Bangsar and there was a fire. And I saw like 30 people running towards this fire with a phone, everybody videoing it. And then when the fire got put out, they all walked back and they started posting it. I said, wow, this is unbelievable. Like social media has actually changed human behavior, right? And that's why it's a multi-billion-dollar business. And then recently I had another tipping point where it was a person who I interacted with not that regularly, but we were kind of friendly, right? And we had a few drinks and the social lubricant hit and we started to talk. And all of a sudden, we noticed that, wow, we agree on a lot of the same things. We're going back and forth, hitting this great conversation, right? When that conversation was over, I couldn't help to think, are we on the same algorithm? Like, are we being fed the same social media, whether it's X or Facebook, and are we looking at these same influencers or their acolytes? Because that's what you have now, right? Like when Elon Musk posts something, there's 1,000 other people who basically regurgitate exactly what he just said. And it's not just him. It's a ton of people. That's the way the world is now. And I couldn't help to think, we're getting fed the same algorithm, and I'm basically putting out this algorithm now into the real world, right? But at least it's human interaction. So AI has been, I think, pervading into our human lives for a long time. And then OpenAI and ChatGPT brought it into the wild and allowed us to actually interact with it face to face for the first time in late 2022.
Basically commercialized it to the individual as opposed to behind the scenes of the corporations.
Exactly. It's the first time that the public actually got a chance to interact with AI. Before that, it was just
Knowingly interact.
Knowingly interact. Because previously AI probably has thousands of data points on everybody in here, and that's how you get your advertising. And I think in the future, with AI products, the evolution of AI products are going to allow AI to be even more pervasive and not have thousands of data points on you, but have hundreds of thousands or millions of data points on you, to the fact where it will know what you want to think, what you want to buy, what you will choose before you choose it yourself. And then they will sell that information to the highest bidder of a product that you're interested in, so they can sell it to you. And that's how that's one of the ways AI will be monetized in the very near future, I think.
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of interesting things that you said through that. So I think one of them, it made me think of when the CTO of Amazon was here around the time of KL20. He made a comment that we've had AI for a very, very long time. We've used variations of names, whether machine learning or other sorts of names, and he made what seemed like kind of a passing joke, but he said we only call it AI until it works, which I found very interesting, because if you think about like the Amazon warehouse, it's a whole bunch of robots running around, and it's essentially AI that's driving it. If you think about their recommendation engine on what should you buy next or what should you buy along with it, it's also AI. When you think about the social feeds, etc., we've had it for a long time. But I think the tipping point, really interestingly, is what you're getting to in regards to it's now permeated into the retail space where everybody has access. It's disrupting the Google model, where are you really going to search, or are you going to just ask an answer engine as opposed to a search engine? Typing it into ChatGPT or whichever sort of outlet you're going to end up looking at. Now that's going to end up being a challenge for Google's business model, because if it's going to end up going directly after search, how are they going to end up coming after it? And we talked about earlier how Google was kind of behind,
right?
And I don't know if you.
I would say now they're
forward.
kind of getting towards the front. So that we were saying the AI race is very interesting, because OpenAI brought AI into the wild in 2022, right? And clearly, it seemed like they were in the front, right? Wow, okay, hey, you can interact. I mean, to me, when I first started interacting with it, I thought it was like fire. It was incredible. I couldn't believe it, and everybody I showed it to had the exact same reaction. I mean, Pri is here. I think I showed it to you first. It was like, whoa, this is incredible. It can write a story. It can write a poem, and then who came out after OpenAI?
I mean, you had Anthropic was out. Meta already had but then they kind of came out with it a little bit more. Right. I mean, Google had DeepMind. The OpenAI people actually several were like DeepMind alum.
Right, and then they had it, but in terms of interacting, I think the second and then you had Gemini come out, and there was a huge failure with Gemini. Right, it was like super woke DEI. If you asked it to give you a picture of a Native American, it showed you like, a black person, a Chinese person, and an Indian person. It didn't make any sense.
Or a historic president or something like that.
Right, show us the founding fathers of the United States. And it was just totally off, right? So at that point, Google looked like it was way behind, which is inherently odd, because you would think Google had access to all the data, all the search data from the beginning. And I remember hearing Eric Schmidt give a speech 15 years ago about, at Google, now we're starting to see people asking what they should do. What movie should I see? Where should I go, right? So you would think they would be ahead.
Yeah.
And you know what? I think that was just a misfire in terms of rolling out, because you look at Google now, that's what I mean. Watching the AI race now, I mean, it is a race. OpenAI is starting to fall behind now because they don't have as much infrastructure. They don't have the data centers and as much hardware as Microsoft. And they essentially gave Microsoft the algorithm when Microsoft invested $40 billion into them. But Gemini just released VO2 recently, which is a text to prompt to video, which is by far the best. I mean, I think Sora again was released 6 months ago, and everybody saw that and was amazed, right? But now it hasn't improved. It hasn't improved drastically as much in the last 6 months.
But Google has YouTube, so they've got this phenomenal training data, and AI is basically what are you training yourself on? Because essentially, like, AI is basically a prediction engine, to be honest with you. It's training off of historical data in order to try and predict what the expected outcome of whatever you're querying or whatever you're asking. If you're prompting to create a video, it's basically looking at its training set and saying, okay, well, you wanted a dog catching a frisbee. Here's what whatever this looks like, or name your thing that they've done. And Google has that. So they have this giant proprietary in the early days of OpenAI, and it's kind of, it's not officially come out, but it's been insinuated that they basically scraped the web without concern of whose information they were taking, and it's really hard to kind of unwind that.
Yeah, they got sued for that too.
Yeah,
When
and
they
they'll
were doing
continue to be.
when they were
you
doing
know?
Google Maps and Google Earth, the same thing. They were
Yeah, same
scraping
thing,
data
same
from
thing.
everywhere, and they got sued for that, and they had to pay a big fine. But I think this is a good time to transition because, like I said, I am a storyteller, right? And the film industry is something that obviously I'm invested in. We just finished making a new film a couple of weeks ago. It'll be out in theaters in a few months, just to promote our Malaysian horror movie Kifara. But no, I think these AI tools are going to help small filmmakers make bigger budget looking films, right? Because now, if you look at Hollywood, right, the last 10 films, the highest grossing 10 films last year were all sequels, and they were all big budget films. They're too afraid to invest in new stories. So that's why you're getting all these regurgitated stories coming back to you, and nothing original because the investment is so big. Now, I think AI will help hedge that, and you'll be able to see more original stories in the future. And I think it'll also give a leg up to the little guy, where they'll be able to create a sci-fi film. You know, that now would cost $75 million. You could bring that down to 10. And in the future, I think if we want to look further down in the future, I think this will be a fully commercial product where a consumer will be able to make their own movie by saying, because now you can make 2-minute clips, right? And that's primarily because of compute.
Yep.
And we just don't have the output yet. But 10 years from now, you could put in, I want to see a movie about a Malaysian hero saving the world from a comet that's coming from another solar system and is getting ready to destroy KL. You can type that in, and it'll be able to produce you an hour-and-a-half movie. And I think it'll be interesting because in that future, instead of directors, you will have professional prompters who will be able to prompt you a movie that will be like the best movie you could see. And frankly, I know this is going to be sad to say for our industry, but I think it's going to diminish the value of a film because it'll be so readily available and so customizable. But you will still get those professional filmmakers who will be able to tailor a story better than the average man. But I think it will devalue it, and it'll probably be relegated more so to home theaters rather than going to movie theaters, unfortunately. I mean, there is still, being a film guy, there is still something to say about getting that theater experience. The big screen, the surround sound, experiencing it with an audience of people, right? There's nothing like going to a comedy and getting that big collective laugh. But in the future, you will be able to prompt the film.
What do you think is the most vulnerable part of it? Do you think it's the screenwriters? Do you think it's the directors? Do you think it's the actors? Or is it, most of the top movies over the last few years have been basically a big CGI display. So that's also basically going to end up getting disrupted as well. So is it across the board, or is there a particular area that you think is the most vulnerable?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think actors are going to, big stars now are going to be selling their rights. They're going to be licensing their rights to these image rights to these AI companies
and voice rights, I assume, as well.
And voice rights, because voice is really important. But I mean, but you could even see now that the movie star is being diminished as the years have gone on. I mean, back in the 80s and the 90s, you had big movie stars. How many are out there now? 3, 4? Tom Cruise.
Still,
Leonardo DiCaprio, right? The right. The
unageable
Tom Cruise,
and he's still doing his own stunts.
Yeah,
that is the real Mission Impossible.
Right. But you look at these Netflix films. I mean, there's a lot of unnamed actors. There's a lot of people Netflix series. There's people you never heard of, right?
Yeah.
And they're just making them into these stars. So and now look at social media. We've got AI influencers. Some of these image generators are able to reproduce the same image across multiple different backgrounds and different scenery. So you'll be able to do the same thing with actors. You'll be able to generate an AI actor, and that AI actor may become a movie star.
Yeah.
So the person who created that likeness may actually own the rights to a movie star.
What they're trying to do, that same thing with AI influencers. There's companies that are doing it. There's also companies that are now doing AI avatars for human influencers so that they can get more personal interaction. It's really permeating across the variety of where celebrities or influencers or personalities are really at and substituting them.
Yeah, to build on that, I know celebrities, local celebrities who have already sold their likeness to AI for this new product coming out of Korea, which is essentially like an AI billboard. Yeah, it's like an AI billboard that you can it's a life-size image of a three-dimensional person walking around, and they can help you in a retail outlet, for example. So if you go to them, they will have any answer to any product in the store. Right, at the mall, instead of a customer information center, you'll have an AI avatar there.
Yeah.
Right. So it is going to be pervasive into all industries. And going back to the movies, yes, writing, it's already happening in writing. Like I mean, if anything, I think it's right now it's being used best as a tool, right? As a tool for writers to become more productive and to create more. I think special effects, it clearly it's gonna take the special effects guys out, right? The artists. Directors, I think they'll be one of the last to go because you need that eye. You need someone to manage AI at this point. So in that case,
there still needs to be the creative side, because like if you think of it like, and again coming back to what I had said earlier, it's basically training off of historic information to predict and use a prediction in order to provide the output. If we think about the movie example, when you're talking about the advertising, it made me think of the old movie Minority Report when he's walking through the mall and it basically recognized him. I don't know if anyone remembers that movie. But there's a lot, like, I can't imagine that being the first one that actually did that sort of display. I can't imagine that an AI is going to be able to predict it. So you need somebody that can kind of have that vision still, because the level of creativity and the future sort of orientation, I don't think we're there yet. Because I don't see the training set being able to be as imaginative as of yet.
It's getting there, yeah. No. Right now, AI is a tool, right? And that's something I wrote about in terms of where it's going, though, right? We're still early stages in AI. I mean, early stages. Well, technically, so Ray Kurzweil, the famous futurist, he's employed by Google. He said that 2025, this year, AI will be smarter than the smartest human being on the planet.
Yeah.
And then by 2029, AI will be smarter than the collective of humanity. And once that happens, I guess that's the singularity point, right? And that is when things start to get, I think, because it's speeding up very quickly. Like right now, there's a new AI product being released every week, every month.
You're on
the ground, and I look at it, right? But at that point, and McKinsey says, so before I get into McKinsey, we talked about it. 2025 is the year of AI agents, and I know somebody asked a question about is AI agents worth hopping on the trend in terms of founders?
Yes.
Yes, AI agents are going to be $1 trillion industry. I mean, it is going to pervade any task that can digitally be done is going to be done by an AI agent. And this year,
massive amounts.
Yeah,
it's going to be a hugely disruptive.
I think is going to be the year for AI agents, the same way 2022 was the year LLMs came out and were released to the public. You're going to get AI agents coming out, and you'll be able to program it. I mean, NVIDIA just announced one yesterday at CES that you can program it to do tasks all across the web.
Satya Nadella did an interview where he said that SaaS is dead, and it's basically going to be AI agents that are going to replace all of it. And I think it's super interesting because you started to see more and more companies building that near the end of last year.
Right.
And so there's this tendency with tech where we overestimate the short term, underestimate the long term. So it's unclear of whether or not we'll get full-blown adoption, but you're definitely going to see 2025 being a big year where you'll see more startups operating in that space. We've invested in a couple of companies in that space, so maybe I'm talking my own book here. But it's definitely going to be disruptive because if you think about it, it's not new. We've had robotic process automation where fundamental tasks are being automated. And the simplest one that I usually use, and maybe it's because I'm a finance person, it's the readily one, is that I can link my bank account to my accounting software, and all of those transactions just push automatically into there. No more need for typing, right? Simple, easy sort of translation. That's easy for robotic process automation under the way that it was done before. But what AI agents are now able to do is they can manage 3, 4 different softwares at the same time, multiple databases. If you have a complicated task that needs to be done, it can be done by an AI agent. And that's going to be the one of where's the stopping point? What are the jobs that are going to end up being under threat? And I think this comes to what you were getting ready to allude to on McKinsey. And I have small kids as well, so like, what's the future for them?
That's right. They just released a report, and this is from McKinsey, that by 2035, 70% of office jobs will be obsolete. So, yeah. What is the future, right? In terms of where we're going.
But like, humans are really good at creating more work. And when we were chatting at the back, I talked about like investment bankers, because like it's a stereotypical 16, 18-hour days of work. But it's been that way for like since the advent of that job. Humans are just really good at trying to figure out new things to do. So maybe Elon's right. Maybe we're going to populate Mars. I don't know.
We like to stay busy. There's no doubt about it.
We like to stay busy. We'll figure out more things to do.
We do. But this is on the other hand, on the flip side of that. This is the first time that we're actually creating something that is smarter than us. By 2035, there's going to be an entity on this planet that is smarter than human beings. So we are essentially going to be the second most intelligent species on this planet. Now, it's weird to refer to AI as a species because I don't think it's self-aware. It's not self-aware yet, right? But it is clearly thinking, and it clearly has more access to more information than most of us at this point. And we don't exactly know how it works. The same way we don't know how a thought is processed in a brain. This is coming from Gregory Hinton, who's the godfather of AI, right? He recently left, I think it was Google, last year because he thought we were just opening Pandora's box with artificial intelligence. And he said it straight up. We don't know. It is a black box. We don't exactly know how it comes to the conclusions that it comes to. And that's wherein lies the danger, because we don't know where it goes from there. Once it's smarter than us, at what point do we stop being the tool user and start becoming the tool ourselves for AI?
I would argue to an extent that the genie may be out of the bottle. Like, that box may already be open. So like, maybe it's not all the way open, but somebody somewhere is going to continue opening that box. So when you think about it from a global standpoint, you have a number of different competing interests. And this is part of the area where it could potentially get a little bit worrisome. Because if you think about what's going on in Ukraine, for example, drones are basically dominating a lot of the field. What's going to happen when robotics become a lot easier? What's going to happen when all of these different things end up moving that direction? And there's national interest across the board. Who knows? There's going to be there's already some strain there. Where's that direction going to go? You have nefarious elements of the black market, this, that, and the other.
I mean, I think this is a great transition into saying, so we said 2025 is going to be the year of the AI agent, right? But I think the first 3 quarters of 2025 is going to be the year of the agent. And then the last quarter and the year 2026 is going to be the year of AI humanoid robotics. Okay, we're already starting to see it. I mean, I don't know if any of you guys managed to catch this video of, there's a company in China called Unitree. It's creating these unbelievable robotics. I mean, the one with the wheels can go over any terrain. It can go up to 20 kilometers an hour or something like that.
That's nuts.
It's unbelievable. And then I was telling Kevin that there's not a very widely circulated video of this Tesla bot, but I saw a video of a Tesla robot catching a ball. Somebody threw a ball, and it was, the reflexes were so fast, it was able to catch a ball. And to me, the mathematics required, the dexterity required to perform that kind of task is scary. And when we talk about nefarious uses and we talk about warfare, yes, I think that Ukraine was certainly the first battlefield where we saw robotics in the wild and we saw drones, and it's scary, right? I'm sure you've all seen these drones of, soldiers begging for their life while a drone just crashes into them and blows them up. Well, it's been said that, after World War II, and the Air Force and air dominance was created, that there was never going to be another land invasion again, right? Well, I would say that with robotics, that's very possible. I mean, especially when you see these unitary robotics, and you mount a gun on top of those, and if you're a country like China, and you have the ability to produce 1 million of these robots with autonomous ships, I would suffice to say that it's highly possible to do a land invasion nowadays with robotics, if we were ever to build to that. The same way, I think, and look, I didn't want to get into geopolitics and warfare here, but I would say China is a sleeping giant the same way the United States was a sleeping giant prior to World War II.
Yeah.
Right? When the Japanese invaded Pearl Harbor, they immediately regretted it, knowing that they'd awaken the economic giant of the United States, and they would be able to build more planes and build more tanks and bring troops over and support the war. China is in that exact same position right now, except from a robotics standpoint.
Yeah.
They have because they have the manufacturing capability that no other country has. Okay, and they're able to, and Malaysia, I'll give you a great example. Malaysia is right in the heart of it, okay? When China took over the port on the East Coast several years ago, they immediately widened the roads over there. Why did they do that? They widened the roads to get into that port so that they are wide enough for a landing strip for an airplane to come in case of conflict in the region. And they've been doing that all across the region with Sri Lanka, Pakistan. So they've essentially got India surrounded with ports that could be converted into military bases. Now, all right, let's go back to AI because I don't want to digress too much.
Let's talk on the good side of the robots,
Okay.
which may end up causing disruptions to the workforce, but we're going to end up seeing a lot of changes to where it's the cost of manufacturing is going to end up being lowered because of the implementation, which is going to end up creating a virtuous cycle that's going to drive down the price of robotics overall, to where you'll see more implementations across the board as manufacturing costs come down. Now all of a sudden you're manufacturing more and more. Where restaurants, are they going to really have to be staffed with workers? When you think about, I just came through the airport, so the baggage handlers, are they really going to end up being necessary? When you think of, I made the reference to the Amazon warehouses. They basically have quality control checkers, but nobody's lifting anything anymore. And so more and more of, especially with the reference that you made in regards to the robot out of China, a lot of these ones that are in agricultural use cases, or a lot of these different fields are going to end up getting disrupted. So it's not just the white collar that's going to get disrupted by AI. Now we're facilitating the robotics that's going to disrupt the whole gamut.
Correct.
I do believe that the transition, that humans are good at figuring out new work, but the transition, because it's moving so fast, I do worry a little bit about the transition phase.
Well, I think, there's going to be a pain period for sure. So we're talking about 70% of office jobs being eradicated by AI agents by 2035. The same thing is going to happen with robotics, right? I used an example earlier when we were chatting. 5 years ago, if you went to McDonald's, you didn't have iPads where you can automatically order your food, or you couldn't order your food from your phone, right? 5 years from now, you're not only going to have iPads, you're also going to have robots in the kitchen.
Yeah.
So those lower end retail is going to be fully automated. I think, most of these retail outlets now in the mall are minimally staffed anyway, right? Because they're essentially just showrooms for people to buy online. But I know there was somebody here from Swarovski. I saw that there was a question. I don't know if they're here, but how do we avoid this, right? I think that in higher end luxury, that's going to be human interaction. Human interaction is going to be a luxury in the future. When you go, and this mostly will be adopted earlier on in Western countries and in Australia, where wages are high. In Malaysia and many Southeast Asian countries, you still have low wages, so robot adaptation is going to be a lot slower, because you'll still be able to afford humans in your businesses. But you'll be seeing this more so in the West, I think, and particularly Australia, where wages are extremely high. But yeah, I think the future, like service industries are going to be dominated by humans less than robotics, like massages, foot spas. And that's another thing going on to Kevin, right? Saying that humans adapt. We do adapt, and the economy will adapt because a lot of the jobs that are available now didn't even exist 30 or 40 years ago when we didn't have these dog walkers, how many animals out there? I mean, the pet economy is in the billions now.
It's huge.
There was no pet economy 30 years ago, 25 years ago, right? We will invent jobs.
Yeah.
And you can see it happening now with wellness, I think, right? We've
Wellness
got
is
like a lot of
definitely
meditation,
longevity and that, yeah.
spirituality, Reiki, massages, spas, all this is going to be dominated by humans, right? But if you want to go to a McDonald's or a 7-Eleven, you're going to be interacting with a robot. You want to go to a 5-star, 3-star Michelin restaurant, it's going to be human waiters.
There's not a service element to a 7-Eleven. It's very transactional, it's high volume, so it's really not necessary. You want to get out, get in, grab what you need. I don't even want to pull my phone out and pay. I just want to kind of walk in, walk out.
Yeah, and a robot isn't going to have that artistry that you go to like a high-end restaurant for, right? Because that's where chefs are really creative.
So
right?
it's being experiential.
Yeah, it's experiential. I think there's going to be a lot more experiential experiences in the future as well. I mean, you already see it now with like these smaller vacation packages just to experience, cruises to Antarctica, Norway.
Digital disconnects as well is going to be a bigger and bigger thing.
For sure, I've been talking about that for a long time. Digital detox, wellness resorts, where you put your phone into a locker, and you go there for a week to totally disconnect. But this is all going to be short term, right? Because as we look into the future and AI pervades into society and humans as a survival instinct, we're going to want to keep up with it, right? And that's where we're going to eventually merge with it, right? And I know Elon has talked about this, and that's why he's got
the
Neuralink and all that, right? So the way I see it is humanity is probably going to divide into, we're going to bifurcate into two different species. Right, one that adopts AI and cyborgs and becomes connected to the net, and others that go deeper within themselves into spirituality. But the funny thing about that is there will also be an AI created aspect to that as well, because, for example, there's a Google AI platform now, I think, called AlphaFold, right? Which all it does is create new proteins and unfold proteins. Right? So we're going to start using AI to genetically manipulate human DNA. And when we do that, we'll be able to genetically modify ourselves. So you're not only going to have people walking around with chips in their heads. This is, 20, we're talking 20, 30 years out. But you're also going to...
But the research is happening now because of the tool. So this is kind of like the groundwork of a lot of that is happening right now.
This is the base. We are at an inflection point in human history where we can actually evolve ourselves, and where we may have to do it to survive as a species.
Which is kind of funny because, like, if you think about it, we're moving into this point where the genetic modifications, as you're alluding to promote longevity, a lot of these things are happening at the same time. We've got a broader movement of like the go organic when you're eating.
Right.
So there's a little bit of like conflict, I believe, between these two competing influences.
That's true. I mean, you're gonna have modified humans almost
eating organic.
This is what we were talking about earlier, right? We were saying this earlier, going back to the movie business, is that sci-fi films essentially inspire tomorrow's future technology, right? So we're talking about Gattaca, the movie Gattaca, which came out in the 90s, which is an Arthur C. Clarke story. But this is 20, 30 years in the future. And right now, at that point, there may be a society where AI is running everything and UBI comes into existence, universal basic income, and people are actually able to volunteer to work on projects that they want to work on because AI will essentially be taking care of your needs. But that again is also a scary thought, right?
Because it's hard to envision a functional form where that happens, unless you're saying that AI is now the new overlord.
Well, it's not out of the realm of possibility. It's just a matter of who controls it and how we control it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because look, AI is going to be making decisions that are purely logical based. It's not going to be determined by who's backing the political
Which
campaign.
was why Skynet created the Terminator to destroy all humans. It was very logical.
Right. It's no, it's a fascinating thing to think about, right? But the point is that now is an important time to make, I think, as much money as you can in terms of startups, building businesses, growing your business, because there's going to be a point where there is going to be pain and there's going to be a lot of layoffs and there's going to be a lot of people who don't have jobs.
Yeah.
And that's when UBI most likely will be implemented.
It's also going to become table stakes. So like whatever business operating that you're in, if you're not taking advantage of AI to create efficiency, to create productivity, to stay ahead, you may end up falling behind.
You will.
So I think one of the things that we're going to see over the coming 5 to 10 years are some of like these legacy businesses doing like when I was in business school, it was like Kodak, which was leading in cameras, then all of a sudden fell behind. We're going to see a lot of these stories where people aren't keeping pace with technology, and because it's moving so fast, there's going to be a lot of casualties where historic businesses that have been around multi-generations are going to end up struggling if they're not staying on top of it. And I'm really keen on like the AI agents, but there's also other aspects where we're going to have more integrated technology where I would love to see, as I don't know if you saw the Meta's Ray-Ban collaboration. You have companies that are already developing apps for when these sort of like consumer products become more commercialized, where there was some students out of Stanford that basically lifted these same glasses. I can walk up to anybody and it's going to pull up their LinkedIn profile. I'm going to be able to do automatic research on them. Imagine if you're a salesperson and you go to like a networking event and all of a sudden I just walk up to you and I've got your bio feeding me information in my glasses while we're talking, and I'm like, so tell me about your kids over at such and such school. How did you enjoy your vacation in Nepal last? That's
right. This is a question we have to ask, right? And in this is that's an open and free society, isn't it? And that's something that we're not really used to, right? And I wrote another article on quantum computing and how that's really going to open up the entire realm.
That'll be interesting.
Combined with AI.
And may crack all of crypto as well. So even though that's seeing big price increases right now, what's going to happen to cryptography with quantum computing?
Yeah, well, there are people working on post-quantum cryptography to try and build those platforms on top of the existing platforms. But yeah, you're right. In terms of AI being able to manipulate people, I mean, that would be a human being able to manipulate another human by utilizing AI. Yeah. And now we don't exactly have that access, but people like Elon Musk, Sergey Brin, Mark Zuckerberg, they do have that access. Yeah. I mean, Musk knew the results of the election 4 hours before it was officially announced. I think he knew that primarily by utilizing his supercomputer mixed with Grok AI.
Well, and there was also the prediction market.
Polymarket.
That became quite popularized.
Yeah. So there's a lot of different ways we can move with AI, but I think it is a double-edged sword, and the best way to move forward is to be informed. Just try and get as much information as you can. That way you can be ahead of the crowd. I mean, NVIDIA yesterday announced a $3,000 supercomputer that you can buy. It's as powerful as 1,000 laptops. For $3,000, you can have a supercomputer that you'll be able to train your own personal AI on. I mean, imagine that. You can have your own AI, and you can have it connected to this supercomputer. And that's only going to get cheaper as we go on, because compute is going to get cheaper as well.
It's going to get smaller. I mean, ultimately, your whether it's an actual phone device, I think the interface is going to end up changing. But the compute power that you're going to have. I mean, there used to be the joke when the iPhone first came out. It was like, this is more than NASA had back in the days of the Apollo missions and all of that. Now, we're going to end up having massively exponential more compute power, and the opportunity of what that's going to be able to provide is quite interesting.
Yeah, and the only obstacle we're going to run into really is energy. Energy is going to be the problem for compute, because compute is very energy intensive. And that's why there's a lot of investments going into fusion right now. Nuclear fusion, people are really pushing nuclear power plants because we need cheaper energy. And there's several companies that are working on it.
Yeah. That's an important one for Malaysia because of all the investments that are going into data centers right now.
Correct.
And with the announce of this special economic zone, Johor is probably going to even get more. They've been rejecting a number of the proposals that have come to them. But ultimately, that's going to be a big differentiator. Thailand has better access to energy. So now a lot of investments are going to go there. But the geo position here is better.
Yes,
So
yes.
that energy question is going to be a very important one.
Yeah, the only challenge here is the heat when it
Yeah.
comes to cooling down data centers because they give off a lot of heat.
Yeah. But
so
I mean, even
that's-
if you talk about some of like the ones in Iceland and some
Right.
of those other ones, you're just substituting one problem for another. But yeah, certainly the cooling in a climate like here, you're gonna have some very hefty aircon bills.
Yes, yes, but you get plenty of sunlight, so I'm sure they'll also be utilizing solar for
Yeah.
that as well.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's
yeah,
one
for
way
sure.
people are trying to get the energy, the net energy that's needed for AI to fully develop. But yes, having your own. I mean, I'm personally working on my own personal AI. I just and you guys could do it too, right? We talk about. There's so many things we can talk about with AI, but people are talking about the living forever, right? Immortality, right? Can you capture yourself in a computer and have that as your own personal LLM for your future generations? I've got 5 hours of recording of my own life history into tape recordings that I'm plugging into an LLM to create my own, essentially a virtual copy of myself.
Yeah.
Currently, and there are going to be companies that are doing that. And I think there already are companies that are doing that. William Shatner sat down and answered 10,000 questions so that he can get a copy of himself
Digital
for his
copy,
future
yeah.
generations. When I think about it, I'm
It
like,
was the villain in one of the Iron Man movies as well.
yeah, but he had the arc reactor, so they had plenty of energy for it.
Yeah.
But why don't we open it up to
Yeah,
questions?
let's do some questions.
anybody
We
has any
answered
questions,
some of the ones that were provided by folks, but I'm
Yeah.
curious of any questions that people may have.
Yeah,
raise
feel
a
free,
hand,
open
shout
up,
it out.
I got a couple. So one was on the creative industry. If you see, because AI is based on someone else's IP, and it kind of overlays on that. So I wanted to get a sense of what's your take on how does the IP issue get handled? Because you're kind of painting a picture of a film being created, but at the end of it, the underlying images kind of sit with someone else.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about this earlier. This is a licensing issue, and that's what happened last year with OpenAI and the New York Times. The New York Times sued OpenAI, I think, for like I don't know, several $100 million, and that was because OpenAI was being trained on New York Times articles and data, and the same thing happened with YouTube, right? Because they were found out to be scraping YouTube data. So ultimately, these are going to be licensing deals, and these AI companies are going to have to buy, movie catalogs. They're going to have to buy
The ones that don't own their own. So
right,
like
if
Google
they don't
has
own them.
YouTube, as we said earlier. Yeah.
Correct, but in OpenAI, there could be a huge deal for a Fox or a Sony or a Universal to buy that the licensing rights to all that imagery, and then you can recalibrate that into a new film. So that'll be done with licensing deals, and it's going to be costly for those companies. But that leads to another question, is that ultimately the AI industry most likely will be consolidated. Right now I kind of see it as like the late 90s in terms of the web. There's a lot of small companies popping up, and those companies are going to get bought out, go out of business, or just get vacuumed up by the larger companies because they own the data centers, they own the hardware, they own the supercomputers that these smaller companies are essentially licensing off of them.
I mean, ultimately, as the training sets get larger and larger, it's essentially going to end up becoming commoditized. There's a relatively low level of proprietary, and so I do agree that it's going to be similar to things that we've seen in the past, whether we're talking about electricity, whether we're talking about, in the 90s, it was the fiber optic cable in the US. There was a big boom bust there. We see it with AWS and cloud sensors as well. There's a massive upfront capex, which is essentially the barrier to entry, and a lot of these folks are just spending it. One of the challenges that I see in the AI space is that the capex and the replacement rate is so fast. Like, how do you actually get a payback period on that? but that's a different question. But ultimately, we're going to end up seeing, I think that we're going to end up seeing consolidation. And I think the reason we're calling them foundational models is essentially those are going to be more of like the infrastructure. They're going to become utilities where other people start building on top of it. And we're going to have more AI agents, applications, etc.
It's
that
happening
are
now.
essentially using that infrastructure.
Yeah, you're essentially like an API of ChatGPT, right?
I mean, name an AI company, and most likely they're using somebody else's foundational model underlying it. I've started using Codium quite a lot, which is basically an AI model in order to write code. They're basically what, like 50, 60% Anthropic, a little bit of a mix of some other folks. So I think in the long run it'll be there. The question on the IP that I kind of wonder is, if I'm typing into Sora or Google or whatever, and I'm just prompting it to create a movie, do I own that license? Because these models are training themselves all the time, if somebody else types in the same thing, who owns it?
Right.
And if I type it in again, it's going to be different. So if I type the same thing in tomorrow.
That's a good question. And if you think about the business model, I would think that it's going to be similar to the way Apple has its app platform now, right? Like if you build an app and then you put it on Apple's marketplace, they take 40%, right?
Yeah.
So I think if you're going to build a movie on top of one of these platforms and then you want to commercialize it, they're going to end up taking a huge percentage of whatever that generates. And on top of that, I also think that you're going to have to pay for that compute, right? So the normal person is going to be able to get a movie that maybe can be 5 minutes, right?
Yeah.
But in order to get an hour and a half film, that's going to be part of the budget where you're going to have to pay this AI company, $1,000, several $1,000s, for example, in order to get the compute to build that out, because that's going to take some time, right? Now, talking about compute and the way it works, right? Like ChatGPT now has ChatGPT Pro, which is like $200 a month, right? Which is super expensive, but it allows you to solve more complex problems. Now, Google also has, I think it's called DeepMind, if I'm not mistaken, 1.5, and that's $20 a month, which is also pretty amazing. Now, funny enough, when I referenced that McKinsey article, that they think by 2035, 70% of office workers are going to be replaced. Well, I think McKinsey is going to be replaced as well, because they're an old legacy company. And with something like a Google 1.5 DeepMind, you can put in parameters to create a report on the lines of a McKinsey report, and it can generate that report with correlations to different subjects and different and put it all together in like 10 or 15 minutes, right? So it'll think for 10, 15 minutes, and then it'll generate you a 30, 40-page report on whatever it is that you're looking to do, whatever model it is that you're looking to test. And that puts McKinsey out of business, right?
A lot of the consulting firms seem to recycle some of the same decks and presentations.
Yeah, right now they're kind of a
No
grift.
offense to my friends at those.
Yeah, right now they're kind of a grift, right? Because that's exactly what they're doing, except they're charging $100,000.
Yeah. And then they don't do any of the implementation. So it's
Right.
just like, here's what you want to do. It could be computer generated, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. You said you had any other question?
I had a question
Yeah.
for Kevin so that he doesn't feel left out.
Yeah.
So, because you look at a lot of deals that's coming in, and
Yeah.
everyone is sort of slapping in,
Everyone.
AI onto, and I saw
Yeah.
a skincare cream which
Yeah.
had AI on
AI generated formulations.
its label.
Yeah.
So, I think the question I had was, how do you get a sense of which one of this is truly sort of leveraging AI as a technology? That's the first part. And I'll
Yeah.
go through the second part so that you can answer.
Yeah.
And you were kind of give an example on this glass, which pulls up, and that was what Google Glass was.
Yeah.
But it failed.
Too early.
So how do you see, how do you see the timing of some of these technologies?
Yeah. So I mean, the short answer is that's how I earned my job, is being able to differentiate what's hype versus what's actual value. The challenging part is like when you're trying to invest in something truly innovative, timing matters. And so, in my own experience, I've done a few businesses that were just too early. If I flash back, I did what now we would call an AI model back in 2008 during the financial crisis. Had basically created a backpropagation neural network model to predict credit risk during the financial crisis. I was a finance person. Way too early. no one wanted to do anything with AI models that were self-adjusting and improve over time the more that you would use it. But if I flash forward to today, everyone's doing it. And so similar to Google Glass, the challenge is trying to figure out market readiness while also trying to be predictive enough to say, am I 1 year ahead of the curve? The best investments, you're too early. The worst investments, you're way too early. So it's kind of one of those ones of trying to figure out, are we on the cusp of adopting for this technology? So I'll talk my own book here just with two examples. One is we've got a company that's doing facial recognition payments. Now, this is something that I think the market is ready for because everyone is opening their cell phones now with their face. There's more things that are using biometrics. There's office buildings in certain areas that you have to scan your face. It's becoming a little bit more normal. And so the thought process from a business owner that's high volume of being able to speed up that checkout line, that has real financial results. And you're also adjusting some of the costs that are associated with these other sort of aspects. So that's one where I think the market timing is quite good for adoption, especially for an Asia player, because a lot of the companies that are doing it are Western based and aren't very good at Asian faces. The other one is thinking about other forms. I've got another one that's doing image recognition technology in order to automate aspects inside of manufacturing, distribution centers, workplaces. They're really focused on health and safety, but there's other applications that you can provide to that as well. That's one of those ones where right now, because of shifting supply chains, and we do have some constraints around capacity in a lot of Southeast Asia, that we're trying to figure out more ways that we can do more with less. And so I look at these and try and say, okay, where is the rest of the economy relative to adoption? And I think there was another saying that just came out relatively recently that I like the way that he said it. Are you trying to tell somebody to eat their vegetables? And what he meant by that is telling somebody that something is new and great and it's good for you isn't really that successful of an argument. What you really need to try and find is somebody ready to adopt what I'm actually selling? Not that you need to tell them, hey, eat your vegetables. You want to be selling them their primary main course that they actually care about. You don't want to sell them a fancy shoe that's 2 sizes too big.
So, sorry, just spinning off that, I'm reminded of a meme that says, I need AI to do my laundry and ironing so that I have time to write and paint, and not the other way around, which is currently how it is. How do you figure out what people need in the line of your work? And I
Yeah.
guess, Michael, for you, like the question being, why hasn't that happened yet? Why are we still focused on taking away writing jobs or making it easier to paint as opposed to automating the process of something as quotidian as laundry?
So I think the barrier to entry on the laundry is the robotic side of it, and the cost associated with that. So I think the prerequisite step in order to get to that is to actually have helpers that could be in-house. Now, honestly, here you can end up getting somebody at a relatively affordable rate for a lot of that, and many people are fortunate enough in order to have that. But when you look across the board, I think the biggest thing is how do you actually physically automate some of those tasks, and it ends up coming down to the robotics question. And in order to be able to get to that level, I think that you need to solve some of the software layers, and you need to solve some of the manufacturing layers to drive down the cost to where it actually makes sense to have something in the house that actually could do that.
Yeah, you bring up a point that's interesting, and it shows how wrong, how we're not always right in terms of humans, and how we're wrong. Because when AI was first coming out, that's what everybody thought. Everybody thought that it would take away the blue collar jobs, and people would be able to paint and write and do all this creative stuff, and it was the exact opposite. And nobody saw that coming with LLMs and basically software being way more pervasive, right? And it's exactly what he said, just to reiterate. That's the second part of 2025 going into 2026 with the humanoid robotics. And that's when they pervade into the blue collar jobs, right? The dexterity is there, the battery power is there, and it's just a matter of time before it becomes more affordable. First, it'll go into the large commercial applications by companies, factories, industries, retail, and then it will trickle down to the consumer when it becomes more affordable, probably
Yeah.
closer to the year 2030, and beyond.
Yeah.
So I wonder, do you think that, I mean, this is quite sort of doom and gloomy, but will that create a sort of have and have-nots that as we move, I mean, you intimated that in what you said earlier, only because of infrastructure, basically. In the developing world, we're still, cash is still king in Malaysia, by and large. Is going to take time for that change? Like, is it going to cause a complete break?
Well, I think the thing is here you already have a huge wealth disparity in between the haves and have-nots. In the West, it's just going to make it larger. So the West will become more like Malaysia in terms of the wealth disparity. It'll just be bigger.
Yeah, I mean, you see a variety of different things. I do think that there's going to end up being this have and have-nots, but I think it's just the pacing along the adoption curve, because you basically need to compare the ROI between what's the cost of a human versus what's the cost of robotics. So you're going to end up having a differentiation in regards to who's adopting first. And in all honesty, if you look at software or if you look at some of these other technologies, it does often end up getting adopted first in higher income markets, and then it kind of trickles down to the rest. So we're probably going to end up seeing relatively similar, because it doesn't make sense for me to have a robotic substitute that essentially is going to cost me the equivalent of, say, 10K per month, when the cost of a human is a fraction of that.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's exactly opposite of what you're saying, right? Whereas software is being initiated in the West highly.
Well, the adoption rate is higher there, because
Right.
why not just hire another body? What's the cost of that software? And that's one of the big things that ends up happening around this market is, well, there's two aspects of that. One, when you talk about software, there's the psychological aspect of it, of I'm more familiar with just hiring another person. And it's easier, it's more comfortable. That I think has broken down, and not entirely, but it's broken down quite substantially. But the flip part of it is, what's the cost associated with it? Not just the upfront, what's the monthly subscription, but it's also what's the opportunity cost, what's the other less visible sort of felt costs that are associated with it, and why not just hire another body? And so I think when we talk about the adoption of AI, it's going to be in a relatively similar, especially when you start getting into robotics, until that starts lowering down. China has to, because it's a shrinking population. If they want to continue to grow, it's one of the reasons why they've had this kind of forethought into investing very heavily into it, because they see that trend and they need to replace. You also see a resurgence out of Japan as they look at their own population and the stagnation there, that they're also now reinvesting quite heavily, as they have been in the past. But there will be kind of like a difference in the phasing of adoption but that's going to be income driven, probably.
Of the robotics, yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question. You guys spoke about ROI, when especially compared to a human and AI. So my question for you is more on an epistemological, like a philosophical viewpoint, where usually in customer service, you want to get in touch with someone, you have these auto questions that people resort to, especially food like that.
Yeah.
But there is a big need where you're like, I need to speak to a goddamn person.
Yeah.
There's always one like that.
It's because a lot of those are very bad.
Yeah, exactly. So do you think, moving on with how AI is evolving, we will reach a point where we rather just want to speak to an AI rather than a human?
I mean, let me flip the question around for you. Say that you have a problem and they have a phone number or a text option. Which one are you generally selecting? Your phone number? Okay. Yeah. I feel like a lot of people oftentimes will want to avoid, depending upon the gravity of the situation, oftentimes just want speed, and they view the texting to the FAQ section, or just give me the answer as fast as possible, and I want to avoid talking to a person. So like, depending upon the situation, I think the challenge that we have is that a lot of the chatbots that people are familiar with are just really, really bad. Has anyone done AirAsia? Not to throw them under the bus, but like maybe one of the worst out there. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, but at some point it'll be good enough where you will want to speak to an AI. It'll be speaking to like a chat GPT.
And you may not know the difference because actually there's a few companies that are doing voice bots right now that are really, really good. And then essentially what it's going to do is basically the same process that is happening with a human currently is it's triaging it. You have one person that's basically collecting a little bit of information to say, can I solve it right now? Or do I need to escalate it to a person that's more technical? And you're going to see the same, the initiation is the same steps. That's why they're doing these like little questions of press 1 or press 2 or this or that, or like all of those steps are basically the same thing. It's triaging it and following the pathway to resolution in order to get to that. So it's very rules based for the most part with a lot of those. And that's relatively easy for AI to come in and start trying to solve, but you'll still have humans in the loop for the foreseeable future. Sorry to talk my own book again, but we've invested in a company that is doing this call center software that can manage these inbounds. They do the triaging, they do all of this. They have AI scripts that'll be live when you do get to a human that's also searching and prompting them so that they have real-time, fast, accurate information, because the training problem on customer service reps is also a bit of a challenge when you think of the size and scale.
To add on top of that, here, so again, I said like from like a philosophical point of view, you have these AI replacing humans. So now, sometimes I talk to ChatGPT. It's a pretty cool person to talk to. Instead of talking to my friends. So I'm just saying, like, have you seen the movie Her?
Yeah.
Will we ever reach that point?
Yeah, let me take that because you know what? You're not alone. There are people that use ChatGPT as a therapist, and it's quite successful in that sense as someone to listen to and talk to, right? I mean, I myself, I speculate with ChatGPT all the time on new ideas and conversations, and it is good to bounce ideas off of. So yeah, I know what you're saying, and that begs to the point where I said, at what point do we become the tools and ChatGPT instead of the tool maker? Because at that point, we're relying on AI so much that what would you do without it, right? That's when it gets a little bit dangerous if we start relying on AI too much. But I think it's just the way we're going.
So like a fun philosophical twist on that is, I think it was last year, there's a very viral interview with Rick Rubin, the music producer, when they're like, so you play no musical instruments, like you have no formal training, like what is it that you do? And he's like, well, I know what I like and I'm very good at communicating that to other people. And he's like, part of music projects that have been some of the most successful in the world. Do you think AI can get there, or is there something like inherently creative in humans that like Rick Rubin could not make his own AI that knows what Rick Rubin does?
I mean, if I throw out my 2 cents on that, I think that we're not there because you're not going to end up having if you think about the biggest names in any creative art, they're the visionaries that came out with it. When you think AI for the most part is trained off of historic and it's making a prediction about the future. Now, you can develop some level of creativity into that, which they have and they will continue to do. But there's still this intrinsic element of a human that is naturally creative. So having somebody that just like, they know what they like and if they can communicate and prompt it very well, I think that's going to end up being the differentiation. I think that'll end up being a differentiator.
That's very possible. I mean, I'll take the other side just for fun, right? Because you think about somebody like Rick Rubin. If none of you, I don't know if you guys are familiar with him, but he's like this musical guru, right? He started Def Jam in the 90s, and he's got this huge white beard, and he just looks like a guru, right? So it's almost like his aura essentially means like if he says that's what it is, people believe him, right? But if you were to replace AI and someone asked AI the same exact question, but it came out of Rick Rubin's mouth, it would probably create the same result. You see what you get what I'm saying? Like if AI is fed on
when he was starting,
because let's look at it. I mean, look, if AI has listened to as much music as Rick Rubin have, which I'm sure it has, right? It should be able to decipher what is the difference and what is the difference and extrapolate what kind of sounds are the top hits from historical records. And it should be able to decipher what that particular sound you're missing is, right? Now, if it had an avatar that looked and felt like Rick Rubin, then I'm sure the artist would agree with it, right? But because it doesn't, and because it's AI, it's a different feeling.
It feels like it could like do K-pop, like figure out what's the next very popular thing of the same genre, like breaking genre.
I mean, it does.
Yeah,
I've got an
yeah.
AI music generator here. I made music for my son on Udio, and he loves it. Right? I mean, it's got his name in it, and he's always asking me to replay the song. And it's a mix of K-pop and like Japanese pop.
But it's fitting with what historically has been around. So it's not
Yeah.
it's not creating a brand new genre,
A brand new sound. Right.
Yeah, which I think is probably the thing. Can we create something brand new that has not been
Well, the
there
funny thing about
before?
brand new sounds are just like you said with investments. A lot of times, some of the best professionals in music will say, "Wow, this guy's going to blow up," right? And then he falls flat. Why? Because he was ahead of his time, right? He didn't. It's a lot of it's about timing, right? Like the general population of humanity moves at incremental steps, and that's the thing I'm talking about with AI is that we're kind of like skipping steps here, and that's why we're so slow to adapt because it's moving so quickly. Like we said, there's a new company coming out every month, every week.
Yeah.
Right?
yeah.
With a new product. So that's why we have to adapt as humans.
I do think when you think about from the enterprise level that a lot of companies are not really ready for adoption. So we'll probably see a continued speeding up on the personal use case. I think we'll have better versions of Siri and things like that where we have our own virtual assistants in our pocket. Before we see full-blown, I'm still a fan of AI agents in the workplace, but before we see full adoption and the full 70% replacement, I think we'll see it from a personal standpoint.
Well, that's 10 years out.
Yeah.
That's still 10 years out.
And that's the way a lot of tech ends up having that trend as well. So we'll see how that ends up playing.
Because we all will be out of jobs soon, I guess.
On that dim note.
Anticipating this painful transition that we're gonna face, all of us, what is your advice? What would be your advice for us all? Should we all come up with AI agents, companies, and sell them to whoever is buying it, or should we all become pussies?
No. I would say enhance yourself with AI. And I'm not saying like put a robot in your head or anything like that, but I'm saying learn how to utilize AI as a tool because that will make you that much more productive. Those are the people who are going to be in that 30% that stay. Okay? The people who know how to utilize AI because you'll be more productive. So 10 years from now, you're in the same job, you'll be 300 or 400% more productive because you'll know how to use those AI tools that are currently being built. So because you just won't be you'll be yourself managing like 10 or 12 different AI agents under you, being able to multitask all at the same time. You see, so you'll be that much more productive. That's why, and this is like the first step to that, right? Like where we are and probably why you're here because you want to learn how to gain a foothold on it. And that's what I see. I mean, those people that stay on the company, they're going to be the ones who know how to use AI to the best of their ability. Everybody else who's going to fall beside, they're the ones who are going to become victims of AI. You know, they're
Some companies that are cutting that off. For example, some of the companies that don't allow the employees to use ChatGPT.
Well, those companies are probably going to go out of
There's
business.
some privacy aspects in regards to utilizing it. So the challenge is being able to ring fence it because certain companies have a lot of concerns around that. What is the data being used for? And that sort of privacy. There's companies that are now coming up and solving that to where they've been able to create the security ring fence around it. On the aspect of what you should do, I'm a little bit biased because I invest in early stage companies. So I want more entrepreneurs, not less. So I always say if somebody has an incredible idea, give it a try. Do a side gig, try and put something out there if it's something that's going to change. If you see a gap in the market and you think that there's value of it that's commercializable, I say go for it. I think society today has plenty of safety nets to where there's enough space for risk taking. But if not, I would say the exact same thing in regards to it's going to become table stakes in the long run. And so you can either be in the front of the line or you can be in the back of the line. And there's a big difference. And I think the biggest difference is when I think about the developers and the ones that are writing the code and all of that, because they're oftentimes the early adopters of a lot of this tech. If you look at some of these folks out there, the guys that are the developers that are really, really phenomenal, they're now superheroes. They're able to do the job of like 10 people. They're now 10x, 50x as productive. But the people that are a little bit further back are still a little bit further back. They're not getting as much value out of it. So I would say that you need to skill up on how to use it and how to use it effectively. Yeah. And there's so many tools that like you can make your own agents in order to do your job. So you know,
and through that, what he's saying, I'm going to harp on exactly what he's saying. And through that learning process, that's when you're going to be able to find these gaps, and maybe that's where the idea sparks to create this company, to create a startup. Because as you're learning, you're going to see things that are missing. If you're on the bleeding edge, you're going to see what's not there, right? And then that's when you'll be able to say, oh, you know what? Maybe I can fix that. Maybe I can build that by utilizing this. I don't know how to code, no problem. Let me get on Anthropic, and I mean, we're not far. I'd say we're five. I mean, we're probably already at a one-man $100 million company, but I think 5 years out from a one-man billion-dollar company. We were talking about that before. Sam Altman predicted this last year. A year, probably 5 years out from a billion-dollar company being run by one person and everything else AI.
If you have to speculate, by the way, thanks, gents. If you have to speculate, right, 70% of jobs become obsolete, growing workforce, so on and so forth. Obviously, very industrious, we adapted as humanity, right? Went through the Industrial Revolution, Agricultural Revolution, all that kind of stuff. So this is going to be a multi-level question for you. Number one, you have to speculate, what are the jobs going to be in the future? The second part of that, how, as a business question, as dads, as fathers that you are, how are you seeing the schools and teachers adapting and adopting different learning, different curriculums? And then the third part on that is where you see there are gaps, how are you then preparing your kids for the future?
Wow. There's a lot to unpack there, right? So I think we'll take the second one. Take the second one first with the kids, right? Yeah. So I've got a 6-year-old, and he loves ChatGPT, right? He uses it as, like I said, as a proxy for Google. If he doesn't know the answer to anything, he'll ask me, can we ask ChatGPT? Can we go on ChatGPT? And if I don't know the answer for it, then yeah, we can. I mean, he's used it to tell himself a bedtime story once before too. He had ChatGPT generate a bedtime story and then repeat it to him so that we can do a bedtime story for bed once he gets tired of my bedtime stories. So I think for kids, because I think schools are behind though in terms of artificial intelligence. Schools are way behind. They're not teaching AI. I mean, even the private schools, even the international schools, as far, at least, to my young kids, I can't speak for high schools and stuff like that. But again, I think it's the same way to prepare workers, right? Just have them get familiar with it, have them learn how to use it. And that way it's weird, right? Like that is going to be the generation that first grew up with AI, right? So like now, like my generation, which is like Zennial, like Gen X / millennial, we're like the last generation to have a normal life and then the internet combined. This new generation is going to be the first generation to have pre-AI and AI together, right? And then from there on, everyone else is going to grow up with AI. So I would say just get them started early on, at least familiarize themselves with what the capabilities of it are. Like you want to, you want to have an app? Sure, let's go to Anthropic and watch it code, Teach them that this thing can actually code something for you, it can build. Teach them how to build, teach them how to interact with it. That's what I would say. The second question, what was the second question about workforce?
Jobs of the future.
I mean, I said service jobs. I mean, I think sales jobs are still probably going to be important because that's usually a human convincing another human to purchase.
It's like Salesforce. They've just hired a bunch of sales guys.
To sell their AI agents.
Right. Right. There you go. But
That's a
Salesforce is
perfect
also
example.
SaaS, right? So
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
in trouble. They're also a little bit right.
Yeah.
They're going to need to adapt.
But they're now betting heavily on AI agents, which is essentially trying
Right.
to stay ahead. It's just ironic that in order to sell AI agents,
you need a human.
they hired a bunch of humans to go around and say, hey, we've got a replacement for humans.
Yeah.
From Jensen that the only areas that AI is not working now is life science. That refers to biological matters.
It's getting there because, like I said, Google has AlphaFold, which is
Yeah.
decoding proteins, and and that's only going to get further where they start creating new amino acids. I mean, I'm not a scientist, but more of a, but I know that it's delving into that industry, and that's where we're going to start seeing, I think, this genetic DNA, with CRISPR and Mammoth Industries and
Certainly,
these
medical research
Yeah.
is
So
is
getting
primed
into
for it because
medical-
the computational power that can come from it and the scenario analysis.
Yeah.
Especially if you're releasing a new drug or something, you can run so many scenarios via that, and it creates a to be seen, quote unquote, safer.
Well, I mean, that goes back to the COVID vaccines, doesn't it? That's why they were able to create mRNA vaccines so fast by utilizing AI, by running through so many different simulations. But yeah, I mean, now to talk my book, right? I'm invested in a company in the US that is a medical device company that's utilizing AI to diagnose medical imagery, particularly with cancers. But they're doing a bunch of other stuff, but also creating holograms to be able to look at those images in 3 dimensions, right? And what we found is that the AI has been more accurate than the humans 9 out of 10 times. But the adaptation for that is a lot slower because you have a lot of FDA regulations.
Yeah.
And also, the nature of the medical business is that you're fooling with a human's body, and the trust in a machine making those decisions, I think at this point is still going to be utilized as tools for radiologists and for specialists, but it is there and it's coming. It'll be in the next 2 or 3 years. It's coming.
Yeah.
It's in trials now.
I imagine the future of like a Star Trek. Sorry, I'm nerdy. The medical bay in Star Trek, where they just wave something at you and it tells you everything about you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of space, when do you think we're going to get there with AI? Why hasn't anyone sent another human to the moon?
So I think there's a couple of aspects on that.
Well, China's working on it. China is set to be the next to go to the moon. I think they want to put boots on the moon by 2029, if I'm not mistaken. They've already gone to the dark side of the moon with Chang'e, right? Yeah. And that's very, very interesting. They were able to grow something on the moon, which is fascinating. They've got their own space station. I mean, we know we've got Elon Musk, of course, catching rockets, which is unbelievable.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And they're using a ton of computational AI to help create create the math in order for that to happen.
I think the big thing is how palatable it is to put human life at risk, and I think that's very risk averse in the present moment. Like if you think about like just an accident with a self-driving vehicle, it gets massive news coverage, but actual human drivers kill way more people, and yet it doesn't get any like they're significantly more safe. And so I think the aspect of right now in the present environment, sending humans into space is not very palatable. And so I think that you need to see a lot more iterations of space launches, whether from SpaceX or from the China Aeronautics, or India has done a number of things relatively recently, Blue Origin, there's a number of space companies. I think there's going to be more investment in that space.
A ton. And I think we will have, in our lifetime, there'll be a space hotel for sure. If Musk can succeed, of course, with Starship, right? I mean, the thing about Starship is, not a lot of people know this, but once you send it up, and he wants to go to Mars, right? It's so large. Once you send it up, you have to send up 8 more rockets just to fuel it so that it can go to Mars, right? And that's why Jeff Bezos had all this.
He's quite
pushback.
good at, like, if you've seen some of the interviews that he's done. He's got a super engineering mindset in regards to the way that he talks about bringing the cost down, and that it's kind of like a phased implementation, that you need to go through these certain steps of incrementally getting larger rockets. You needed to start crossing these certain milestones in order to get to that level. And it's all about driving down the cost of cargo. And once you get to that reliability and the cost driven down, you're going to start seeing it become much more commercialized. You're going to see space hotels. Now, the time frame, he's had a tendency of over-promising, which is his job because, he's an entrepreneur. Like, that's what we all do.
But he's already done it in a sense with the reusable rockets. The cost factor to get things into space is so cheap compared to what it was. I mean, if anybody here is thinking about starting a space company, you can do it. You know how much it costs to send something to space on a shared rocket? $3,000 a kilogram. That's reasonable. I mean, if you can produce mini satellites that are 5 kilograms, it only costs you $15,000 to get it up to space. That's very reasonable. I mean,
I weigh 90, so I'm starting to do the calculations myself.
Yeah, a couple $100,000. I don't know how comfortable it'll be, but yeah, and then of course there's Starlink that's essentially creating this web of internet around the entire world at 125 megabytes a second, which is fantastic. You'll be able to have that on planes, yachts, anywhere around the world. Remote Congo, and it's incredible, right?
Yeah.
It's just as good as home. And it's relatively cheap.
Yeah.
Mine, I have time. It cuts out all the time.
There's going to be a big management aspect because essentially it's unregulated space in the present moment. So ultimately you're going to end up having complications associated with these low Earth orbit. But I mean, it's phenomenal what can end up coming from it. So when you think about the difference of the haves and have-nots in regards to access to technology, Starlink is still outside of the price range of somebody that's living in a rural, remote village, but ultimately it's being driven down, and it will end up creating more of a level field without having to lay new cable.
So actually, we've got quite good in arc spaces if we ever decide to do it. Does anyone have any?
So on the filmmaking side, right? How do you personally manage that whole thought of, again, I may be using this word very loosely here, losing that respect from your audience in terms of, okay, that's done by AI. Kevin is just pressing a couple of buttons, a couple of things. How do you manage that and that appeal, right? Because I'm also a movie guy. I love going to the cinema, experiencing. You guys talk about experiential and stuff like that. That's all going to be lost with AI.
Yeah.
It's going to look great. Cosmetically, it's going to look great. But, that whole thought of, that's not someone's idea. That's not a narrative from a lived experience. That's something historically learned through a machine. How do you deal with that personally?
Well, I think it'll be, how do I deal with it personally? Well, I think it's a while down the road still. And it will be costly to make an AI film, okay? And I think that filmmakers, it's not going to be fully AI automated. The good ones, the ones that you're going to see that are made by somebody else, there will be directors involved in making it, okay? There will be creative minds making it. It can't be fully AI. And I don't think we'd want it to be fully AI because it would be missing those little human imperfections, right? Or the human emotional aspects of it. I mean, some of the most important parts about making a movie are the sound. Like I just went to the MPO on Monday and watched Harry Potter, The Chamber of Secrets with a live orchestra. And it just goes to show how powerful music is in a film, right? So in order for AI won't be able to conglomerate that. That'll be done by a director. Maybe some of that music to cut costs will be generated by AI, but it'll be influenced by a creative director. So there will always be a human touch in that creative realm. And that might be a differentiation point in entertainment. Like that might be a selling point, fully human made. Versus AI human made. Because like I said, it will bring down the cost cheaper for independent filmmakers to make bigger budget films. So you might, Hollywood has been so formulaic over the last several years. You're going to start to see more interesting films by independent filmmakers. So you might be able to see a big budget film that has the look of a big budget film, but the emotion and the feel of an independent film, which is something that we're not used to, and that could be very interesting, right? So that I'm excited about. There are things that I am excited about in this space, and because they promised it with digital CGI in the 90s, but Hollywood got all bogged down, and budgets just kept inflating anyway, right? But now I think you'll truly be able to make big budget films at an independent level. And that to me is an exciting factor.
I like the aspect of like the in the home. So apart from that, like quality is still going to be quality. So there's going to be a space for like the true creative folks. But I like the aspect of like, how many times have you been on Netflix scrolling? What am I going to watch? I don't know what I'm going to watch. I would love to be able to just automatically generate what I'm actually in the mood for, as opposed to just scrolling. So I could look at it and be like, you know what? I don't really like this Game of Thrones prequel. I want to make my own. I want to do a fan fiction. I didn't really like the last episode of Sopranos. I want to remake it and do a new one. Or, like what would happen if Seinfeld was made with a new cast of characters? Or like, like I could go through the gamut of like things. And personalized experience, or changing the endings, or follow your own adventure, sort of like have it interact with me. I think that there's some interesting avenues where
you want to get real invasive. You could have your AI agent say, based on my interactions and my communications today for the mood I'm feeling, can you generate a movie to perk me up? Because it will know everything that you've been
Spotify,
communicating, right?
So like, why not?
Exactly. You do it with Spotify, right? Can I chill vibes
Yeah,
or whatever?
exactly. I'm getting a playlist
you'll be able to do the
set to my
same
mood.
thing with a movie. Yeah. I know that's strange, but and it is invasive, right? Because at that point, ChatGPT or AI is becoming the cure for the way you feel, and that might not be healthy.
We could be watching strange things.
That might not be healthy as a human. So that's why I think once a lot of these jobs get taken over, it's going to be real important that a lot of people will be able to focus on spirituality and like ask the bigger questions, right? About like reality, where we live, religion even. These things might grow. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. We might be able to actually expand our minds because, that's one of the things that we're struggling with now, I think, is that technology, this is an old Einstein quote, I think, has surpassed our humanity in a sense, where we have been evolving so fast technologically. But from a human standpoint, have we been evolving at the same pace? No, I don't think we have, right? And hopefully this will free up time for us to be able to catch up.
Yeah.